Hello, friends. Today, on this Memorial Day, we are going to press the pause button on the book, The Great Controversy. And I'm going to begin by sharing an excerpt from the book Lone Survivor by Marcus Luttrell. It's the story of four Navy SEALs whose position was compromised on their mission in Afghanistan, and now they were in the fight for their lives against well over 100 Taliban soldiers who were closing in on their position. And so I'm going to read to you the excerpt of the heroic actions of Lieutenant Michael Murphy, whom you may have heard of this story, where he makes a cell phone call out in the open in the midst of gunfire in order to save his men. And so here we go. By the way, I may paraphrase a couple of things here just to make it, obviously a little more appropriate for the potential viewers. And so, with that, here we go. Above me, I could see the tree line. It was not close, but it was nearer than the village. But the Taliban knew our objective, and as we tried to fight our way forward, they drove us back with sheer weight of fire. We tried against all odds and just could not make it. They knocked us back again, and we retreated down, making a long, pathetic loop back the way we'd come. But once more, we landed up in a good spot, a sound defensive position, well protected by the rock face on either side. Again, we tried to take the fight to them, picking our targets and driving them back, making some ground now toward the village. They were up and screaming at us, yelling as the battle almost became close quarters. We yelled right back and kept firing, but there were still so many of them, and then they got into a better position and shot Mikey Murphy through the chest. He came toward me, asking if I could give him another magazine. And then I saw Axe stumbling toward me, his head pushed out, blood running down his face. "They shot me, bro," he said. "Can you help me, Marcus?" What could I do? I couldn't help except by trying to fight off the enemy. And Axe was standing right in my line of fire. I tried to help him get down behind a rock, and I turned to Mikey, who was obviously badly hurt. "Can you move, buddy?" I asked him. And he groped in his pocket for his mobile phone, the one he had dared not use because it would betray our position. And then Lieutenant Murphy walked out into the open. He walked until he was more or less in the center, gunfire all around him, and he sat on a small rock and began punching the numbers to HQ. I could hear him talking. "My men are taking heavy fire. We're getting picked apart. My guys are dying out here. We need help." And right then, Mikey took a bullet straight in the back. I saw the blood spurt from his chest. He slumped forward, dropping his phone and his rifle. But then he braced himself, grabbed them both, sat upright again, and once more put the phone to his ear. I heard him speak again. "Roger that, sir. Thank you." And then he stood up and staggered to our bad position, the one guarding our left, and Mikey just started fighting again, firing at the enemy. Only I knew what Mikey had done. He'd understood we had only one realistic chance, and that was to call in help. He also knew there was only one place from which he could possibly make that cell phone work: out in the open, away from the cliff walls. Knowing the risk, understanding the danger, in the full knowledge that the phone call would cost him his life, Lieutenant Michael Patrick Murphy, son of Marine, fiance of the beautiful Heather, walked out into the firestorm. His objective was clear: to make one last valiant attempt to save his two teammates. He made the call, made the connection, reported our approximate position, the strength of our enemy, and how serious the situation was. And when they shot him, I thought mortally, he kept talking. "Roger that, sir. Thank you." It's pretty heavy stuff. I read that in order just to bring us closer to the reality of the sacrifices of countless of those who lay down their lives for the freedom that we enjoy today. And friends, I would submit to you that there is a principle that drove them to do what they did. So, a couple of principles actually. One is out of John chapter 15, verse 13, which says, "Greater love hath no man than this, but to lay down his life for his friends." And in that principle, you have this concept of your life is lesser than that of your friends. And that is a Christian principle, to esteem others higher than yourselves, to practice selflessness, even when it comes to who gives their life in a given moment. And so in this we remember and are grateful for those who gave their lives. So there is that principle running through that. Greater man hath no man this than to lay down his life for his friends. And that could apply to those with them in the battlefield, but it could also apply to those back home and the freedoms that they're laying down their lives for. But to make that concept of the freedoms all the more clear, you have Jesus in Philippians chapter 2. And I want to read to you starting in verse 5 that says, "You must have the same attitude that Christ Jesus had. Though he was God, he did not think of equality with God as something to cling to. Instead, he gave up his divine privileges. He took the humble position of a slave and was born as a human being. When he appeared in human form, he humbled himself in obedience to God and died a criminal's death on a cross." And here you have Jesus laying down his life. And it was not in the immediate saving of another person's life. In other words, it wasn't him stepping in front of another person, taking a bullet or taking any kind of death blow. But it was more on a greater scale, obviously, because this was about the salvation of the world. But what I'm highlighting here is that Jesus died for a principle. He died for salvation. He died for our freedom. Not only, he wasn't really necessarily dying for freedom, the freedom of his people amidst the Roman Empire and Roman oppression and these kinds of things, but he was dying that we most ultimately will experience spiritual freedom. But the principle that we enjoy today in America definitely falls into that. It is something that looks at what Jesus did and honors that and recognizes that the godly principle is for liberty for all. And so in the midst of that, you find Jesus saying words under that extreme stress and under the midst of dying. At one point he says, "Forgive them, for they know not what they're doing." And then finally, before giving up the ghost, he said the words, "It is finished." And so you fast forward to the excerpt that I just read, those final words by Lieutenant Michael Murphy. "Thank you, sir." Roger that. "Thank you, sir." In those instances, you have someone who is in the utmost level of selflessness, absolutely not thinking of themselves. Jesus never thought of himself or esteemed him higher than anybody else. He was constantly in that mode, always knowing that he was going to the cross. But in those moments, speaking those words on our behalf, "It is finished." I would suggest to you that those moments before laying down a life are very sacred moments. Obviously, Christ in the gospel, him being on the cross, is the utmost of sacredness. But I believe there's a sacredness to every person who's given their lives, and that's why we take a day to pause and remember those things. But I would also challenge us a little bit further and to allow those who have fallen for us, ultimately Jesus, and then of course, absolutely all the men and women who have laid down their lives so that we can do what we're doing today, enjoying freedom. Allow those examples to inspire us to possess that same type of selflessness. And friends, it's obviously not every day that we're called to lay down our lives. But each and every day, what if we lived in that mindset? What if we esteemed others higher than ourselves, as Christ has exemplified to us, and as many men and women in our nation have caught that vision and have followed suit? Well, only one way to find out is to give your life fully to Christ, to place yourself in His arms, pleading for Him to sanctify you and I, to consecrate us for the great work that He has for us, and to give us the faith of someone who would be willing to give their life for the freedom of another person. Not just to save the life of another person, but even to save and preserve this principle in another person's life. It's a beautiful thing. It's a powerful thing, and but yet it's a holy thing that we can only experience when God gives that to us. And so, friends, God be with you all. May you be blessed and filled with gratitude on this Memorial Day. God bless you.